Welcome back to Real Wealth Podcast. This is Mike Proctor with sponsoring Leading Edge Financial Planning. Here on Real Wealth Podcast, we just are here to learn how to live the best life possible with the time we have left, and also learn a bit about entrepreneurial stories and how people get where they are, and also how to run businesses better, make more wise financial decisions. And today we have John Dini. He has started the exit map program. He's got a full suite of tools for advisors to use to help entrepreneurs to transition their business. He's an expert in the business transition space. He does succession planning, exit planning, business transactions, consulting. He has over 12,000 hours of face-to-face coaching with business owners. He is the most successful business peer coaching operator in the U.S., and he's been signing both sides of his paycheck for over 30 years. So, John, welcome onto the podcast. I'm excited for this interview today.
Thank you, Michael. I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, and as a subscriber to your services, and the tools that you have put together that help to assess business transition readiness, I have really appreciated that level of work because it makes it a lot easier for a business owner to come in, do an assessment, and for us to have a conversation about how ready they are or find kind of the hot points we need to focus on. But a lot of that too starts off with, I've shared your book, The Exit Map. You've written 3 books, right?
So far, yes.
Yeah, and working on a 4th, so I hear, and so congratulations. So very, obviously, you're very accomplished in this space, and I'll try to stay out of the way and let you just kind of talk. But yeah, so they are interesting times right now. But we can focus on a little bit more of the mechanics or readiness for business owners as they think about the end game of their own business, because a lot of business owners start businesses, and eventually in their mind, they think there's going to be an end to it, and they hope it's a positive one. But what are the real statistics on that? If you want to speak to that a little bit on when a business owner wants to actually transition out or retire.
Sure. Thanks. They're kind of dismal. I don't mean to discourage people, but there's a reason exit planning has become so popular in the last 5 or 6 years. Baby boomers are the most entrepreneurial generation in history. A lot of them, as they talk about the pig and the python, and that's in my last book, in your exit map. As the boomers came through, they overcrowded the schools, they overcrowded the universities. Statistic I use about the growing up of boomers is from the mid-1960s to the mid-1970s, we formed 600 new community colleges in the United States because the educational system just couldn't take the wave of the boomers coming in. And when they got out of college, they found out that corporate America didn't have real neat corner suites for them. It used to be, that you got a college education and you went to college and you got a nice corporate job because you had a college degree. But in the course of the 20 years of the boomers hitting college graduation age, they increased the number of college-trained people in the United States by 600%. And corporate America was not ready for 600%. So they became entrepreneurs. A lot of them went out and formed their own businesses, and they became the dominant force in new business formations. They were the dominant force in franchise growth. And I go through a lot of this in the last book. From 75 to 1980, franchise sales in the United States grew by over 1,000%. And all these boomers were out. And one thing they learned early on was if you want to beat out the other boomers, you've got to work really, really hard. So they became this compulsive work ethic generation. And now they're retiring. The youngest boomer is 56 years old and thinking about retirement. The oldest is 75 and hopefully thinking about retirement if he or she hasn't done it already. And so if you look at the numbers, there's still about 75, 76 million boomers around. They still own just over half today, just over half the business employers in the United States. I'm not talking about real estate partnerships or single member LLCs. If you've got 5 employees or more, it's over 50% likely that it's owned by somebody 56 years old or older. So I love to do the math. I have a degree in accounting, although I've never practiced as an accountant, but I always go and look at the numbers. That equates to about 300,000 boomer business owners a year reaching 65. If we just take that as the median point and where you would retire, okay? The IBBA, the International Business Broker Association, the private equity market, buying up mid-market companies, and investment banker intermediaries combined sell about 9,000 companies a year.
Wow.
Do the math.
Yeah.
300,000 people, 300,000 business owners are turning 65 every year. The intermediary industry is selling 9,000 of those. The other 290,000 of them have to find their own path out of the company. Now, of course, those numbers are reported. Pepperdine does a survey every year of the industry, and the numbers are verified. But of course, nobody is counting how many businesses get passed on to family, how many get sold to employees, management buyouts, transfers, given away to employees. A lot of times, especially in small retail businesses, I see owners just walk away. And if you've provided for your retirement, that's fine. You know, I just had a client yesterday inform me that he was not going to list his company for a mid 8-figure number because he had made enough money. He wanted his son to take it over, and he didn't care if he got paid for it. If you're in that position, that's wonderful. Not a whole lot of us are in that position to walk away from that kind of payday. But, you know, if you talk to a business owner, you are 85% likely when you say, what is your plan? 85% likely to either get, I don't know, or when I don't feel like doing this anymore, I'm going to sell it to a third party. I've just told you what the odds are selling it to a third party. Most people should be doing more planning than that.
Yeah. So, John, how long does it typically take a business to get from regular daily operation into a space of it's ready to be transitioned, ready to be looked at closely by a prospective buyer?
You know, business owners ask me that virtually every day. And I have a fairly straightforward answer. Uh, I can do a plan for you to get out of your business tomorrow, or we can take some time doing it. They are inverse curves of each other. Risk and time are the two factors that are really fight each other. So you want to get out of your business tomorrow? Fine. Let's draw up a promissory note for whatever you think the business is worth. We'll have your employees sign it. You can walk away, and you can just hope you get paid over the next 5 or 10 or 20 years. Good luck. But I can get you out of the business tomorrow. 3 years, I can arrange most reasonable kind of transfers, either third party or internally, in 3 years and have them set up. There's tax planning to be done. There's obviously legal planning to be done. 5 years would be better. 8 years in our industry is heaven. If I have 8 years to work with, I can pretty much assure you that you're going to walk away with the full fair market value of your company on the last day that you give up control. Anything in between, it's a trade-off.
Maybe another question is what kind of tools are available? What can a business owner do to begin to assess maybe even what they don't know about succession planning if it's their first time through it?
Well, as you know, Michael, we have assessments and other people have assessments too. Um, but it all comes down to kind of a triangulation, and it's the same kind of triangulation that financial planners and wealth managers do. This is how much you have now. This is how much you can save in the time period until you want to leave. And in a business owner's case, you've got the third factor, which is this is what you can probably cash out with when you do leave. So there's a lump sum there that doesn't exist for many other people that are, dependent on their ERISA retirement plan or whatever. And obviously, knowing that lump sum or what that lump sum is likely to be requires some intelligent approach to valuation. Um, and then, looking at the cash flow of your company. A lot of times we see somebody that has a decent planning time frame, 5 years, 8 years, and we say, well, this number that you want to retire with, you know, isn't isn't there the way your company is running now. And they're business owners. They come back and they say, well, how much more would I have to generate? And I say, well, you'd have to grow the company by 25% in the next 5 years. Oh, I can grow the company by 25% in the next 5 years. I just needed to know what the target was. So that's the kind of flexibility and ability a business owner has that employees don't have. But with those three factors, how much are you going to need? How much time do you have? And what do you have now? It's the same simple triangulation equation that everybody does when they're financial planning.
So given that, and given that most businesses are not in a position to just have anybody walk through the door, do due diligence, and then, make an offer, because if they were to make an offer based on what they could see, sometimes it is disappointing. Many businesses have things that are going on behind the scenes that aren't obvious to everybody else, but once you start looking, there are things that need to be addressed. So the question that's coming to mind has to do with business owners are busy with what they do. Typically, they're wearing a lot of hats. They're running a lot of directions. They're putting out fires. How should a business owner allocate time towards working on their business or preparing it so that when there is a willing buyer and they're offering them a good number, or they could justify offering a good number, it's ready, and and they have something they can be proud of for that situation when the time comes.
Before I address that, just for a second, we talk about valuation again.
Okay.
If you don't know the fair market value of your company, that good number may be the best number you'll ever see, but you've got to know that when you get it.
But John, it's 5 times, right?
No. Excuse me, Michael. I'm going to have to take a contract out on your life. If I have one more CPA tell his client, all small businesses sell for 5 times cash flow, or 5 times earnings, or 5 times pre-tax, or 5 times whatever, I'm going to shoot him. No, it's the numbers all over, and it depends on the buyer too. I mean, obviously, larger companies attract buyers who pay higher premiums, but you need to know that value so you know whether your target's reasonable. And unfortunately, most of the business owners I talk to say, "Well, my business is worth 5 times," and I say, "5 times what?" And they go, "Well, I'm not sure, but I talked to a guy at a trade show who knew a guy in another state that sold a company something like mine. And I think mine's a little bigger than his. So I think mine's worth $5 million. Okay. And $5 million is 5 times what? Well, probably my cash flow if I add in my cell phone and my car. It's just, they have no idea how to approach it. But as far as cleaning up goes, one of the big things, and this isn't even a plug, we have an owner centricity quiz, and it's online and it's open. It's under ownercentricity.com. You don't have to pay anything as a business owner. You don't have to be participating in our system of coaching to prepare people for exit. And it will score you on how owner-centric your company is in its decision making. And that's really one of the first things you need to look at when you look at the value of your business. Nobody wants to buy your business. I don't care how small it is. $1 million company, $1 million in gross revenue, 500,000 in gross revenue. If you make all the decisions every single day in the company, it's unsaleable. Okay? Nobody wants to buy a rotten job, and you have a rotten job.
Mm-hmm.
I see it so much in our assessment. People say, "Oh, I have managers that make all the day-to-day decisions." Great. How much are you working? 60 hours a week. No, timeout. I'm sorry. you know, Somebody is not making all the decisions for you if you're working 60 hours a week. And nobody wants to buy a company. Nobody wants to take their life savings or their retirement plan or go out and get a big loan and buy a business so that they can work 60 hours a week. That's not their vision for the future. So delegating, learning how to teach other people to do the work on a day-to-day basis, cutting back on your hours is, I think, the most critical and primary focus you should have in preparing your business. Yes, documentation is great. Rising revenues and profit margins are great. Sure, there's a lot of other things that make a business very appealing. But if the business is totally dependent on you, you're hanging yourself.
Right. Yeah. Leaving your brain with the business when you leave the business isn't a great option. It's better to do it when it's
Yeah.
outside of your head. And it
Yes.
takes work. You got to
Yeah.
train, you got to create the systems, you got to institutionalize it, systematize it, and it does take intentionality to get there. And
And it's a learning
yeah.
process.
Oh yeah.
Very, very few entrepreneurs are built or experienced to train people to take their place. Gino Wickman, who wrote all the traction books and created the EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, Gino says it very well. I say it in my second book, Hunting in a Farmer's World. There are hunters and there are farmers. Gino says that there are visionaries and there are integrators. The entrepreneur needs somebody, in most cases, that is not a mini-me. It's somebody that has a different approach and kind of the opposite personality pattern that the entrepreneur has. If you hire another person like you, they're going to wind up being like you. I have a good friend who has a successful wealth management firm. And when I started coaching him, gosh, probably 20 years ago, he said, I've got to get a second in command. And I've got to teach her all the things that I have to do and run around like crazy all day because I'm a bottleneck and nothing can happen in my company that doesn't pass my desk. He worked on it. He found somebody. He trained her carefully. 5 years later, he said, I've failed. And I said, why did you fail? She seems very competent to me. He said, yeah, she is. But now everything stops on her desk. I didn't fix anything. My company has the same problem. It's just a different bottleneck. Right.
So what's the most helpful frame of reference shift that a business owner can have when going from operating a business to working on the business and having something that is transferable?
The ability to take a vacation and not have your cell phone on you all day long. I think I mean, that's very rudimentary, but it's true. I've said in the book I'm referring to, Hunting, my second book, Hunting in a Farmer's World, I talk about, what did I call it? Not reverse enthusiasm, but something like that. It's hard to describe, but I had an owner come back to me that I was working with, and he said, I just went on vacation for 2 weeks, and I came back, and there were no emails that I had to worry about that weren't junk. My cell phone didn't ring the whole time. I walked around to all my top managers, and I said, I'm back. How's it going? They said, fine, doing good. Everything's all right. I came back to my office, and I sat there, and I said, this doesn't feel nearly as good as I thought it would. We like to be needed. We like to be decision makers. We like that little hit of dopamine that comes every time you say, yeah, they had to come and ask me. I knew what the answer was. Nobody else did. You've got to train yourself out of that if you want a really saleable company.
Yeah, and empowering your people to take it on and take ownership, and I think that feels really good. Um, but yeah, you're right. Everybody needs to be needed.
Sure, sure. But the owners complain to me constantly that my employees can't make decisions. And I say, "Okay," and I watch them work. And they're sitting there and they're doing something, and the employee comes in and says, "Boss, what should I do about this?" And they know that they should tell the employee to figure it out, that they should ask the employee, "What do you think the answer is?" But it's so much easier to just give them the answer and get them out of the room and go back to what you were doing.
Yeah, and retraining yourself to try to get out of the way and get rid of the bottleneck. And
And we say and because you use our tools, we ask for 2 dates, right? When do you wanna step back from running the day-to-day, and when do you wanna be entirely gone from your business? If we work with an owner and the owner successfully hits the target for stepping back from the day-to-day, the leave entirely starts to stretch way out because now they're having fun. Now it's a blast running the
right.
business. Mhm.
hmm It's worth more than ever, and it's just as fun as ever.
People think that when you say you own a business, they think that you get to do only what you feel like doing, and business owners know that's so not true.
Yeah, if you do it well. But if the business owns you, it is the other way around.
Mhm.
Then you have a very undesirable job, very high risk,
And a lousy boss.
and a lousy boss. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, hey, let's talk a little bit about you, John. How did you get into entrepreneurship? Like, what kind of led you into well, I know you're in a different field than where you started because you started off owning some manufacturing, running businesses, doing a
Mhm.
lot of a lot of working with other business owners. So why don't you just maybe share some of your story about that?
Yeah, non-traditional college student, got kicked out, for my behavior, uh, although my academics reflected my behavior. Um, Went back later, finished nights, got my MBA, on nights and weekends, um, and, got a job. I guess my first business ownership was I was a salesman for, a company on the East Coast, and they had a California branch that was doing very poorly, and they asked me if I could go out and take it over, and I did, and I could sell, and, that was about $1,000,000 in gross revenue, and 15 months later, we were at $5,000,000 gross revenue, and I had no clue what I was doing, and the wheels came off, and they had to send in the rescue team, I was only 30 years old. I mean, I had no clue. But I found out I really liked making all the decisions every day. So from there, I did a couple of turnarounds for other smaller companies, eventually one in healthcare. Turned around a medical group, built it out to a string of medical groups in Southern California, sold that to a hospital chain, and went out in the consulting world. I began teaching people to put together the kind of networks and systems that were necessary to deliver healthcare when you're contracting with big health plans, so physician and hospital networks. Did that for a while, moved to San Antonio in the process. I was in LA, as I said, and was enjoying it, but lived on an airplane and had 2 little kids by that time and was beginning to hear, "Dad, you're never at a recital. You never see my baseball games." And decided that wasn't the way I wanted to live. So I looked for something I could do locally. I found a franchise called the Alternative Board, where you could put together business owner peer groups. I knew nobody in San Antonio because as soon as I got my family here, I jumped on an airplane again. You know, I've got my own personal consultant joke. That's true. You know you've been doing it too long when the gate agent for the 4:45 AM continental flight to New York asks you to his retirement party, okay? So, um, I I, uh, I found this franchise, and I built it up, and we were very fortunate. San Antonio was a very rapidly growing town, with an underserved business community. That's where I became very successful in the peer group world. From there, I started brokering businesses on the side, and I really came to exit planning by choice. I had started developing tools for what I didn't even know was called exit planning at the time. Just as a business broker, I was talking to way too many company owners that were not at all ready to sell, and I wanted to help them. I was a consultant and a coach by nature, and I started putting together an assessment. I started putting together some other tools that I could use to help them, and eventually got a call from one of the certification programs. I've since been to both in this industry. I didn't know there was certification in this industry. I was really kind of flying in the dark, and went and had my eyes opened, found out there were a lot more ways to get out of your company than the average business broker knows. When you're a hammer, everything's a nail. So, people will come to me and say, I want to get out of my company. I said, fine, I'll list it for sale. I'll put it up on the web. We'll see if anybody bites. That was about it. So, learned more about family transfer, learned more about management buyouts. I've done a few ESOPs. Not a specialist in it, but I know how they work. And eventually gave up the franchise of the peer groups, although I still coach about 25 local CEOs in mid-market companies. But started exit planning full-time, and from there developed the set of tools that you've mentioned already, and started selling the exit map tools to other planners around the country. So, as I say in the bio flyleaf of my books, people like to say I'm a serial entrepreneur. I know the truth is I'm just chronically unemployable.
Self-awareness is really powerful, though. It's good. Don't spit your coffee. Since entrepreneurship is easy, would you mind sharing?
That's a good thing I wasn't drinking coffee then.
Would you mind sharing maybe a point of struggle of a time that you did have a difficult period that you had to overcome, and how did that
No,
happen? What did you
lots of
learn
periods.
from it?
Actually, I didn't have you can tell with my checkered career, I didn't have many mentors, but you did ask me before we went on air about a mentor, and there is one that I can mention, and I didn't have much interaction with him. When I went to California, the company had just taken on some European ownership, and Hans Joachim Handreki was the CEO of that company, and he was also the CEO of about 14 other companies. He had companies scattered on both sides of the Iron Curtain at the time. And when the wheels came off, as I told you, Hans came out to see me and ask about the problems in the business. Our inventory was growing because I didn't know how to order. I knew how to price and sell, but that was about it. And he came to me and he said, John, he says, things are not going well. He said, you were doing really well for a while, but now I see a lot of problems in this business, and I don't know what you're going to do about them. And I said, Hans, I said, I don't know what you want from me. I really don't. I'm working 70 or 75 hours a week. I sleep here some nights. I come in, I'm the first one in every single morning. I think we had about 30 employees at that time. I'm the first one in every single morning. I stay here burning the midnight oil long after everybody else has left. And, I'm trying to keep my finger on every single thing that's going on in the company. And, what do you want from me? And he looked at me, and said, John, if your sales and profits were going up and the company was running well, do you think I would come out here to criticize you for leaving early in the afternoon? Ding! The light bulb went on. So that was probably the single best piece of mentorship I ever had. It's about the result. It's not about how hard you work.
Absolutely. And it's easy to confuse effort and results because you can work really, really, really hard and be extremely inefficient. I know I've been there, and but yeah, once you can figure out better systems, better ways of doing it, keep improving, automate, get a great team in place.
No,
Absolutely.
well said. Well said. You've got to step back from the company. And, I worked at one point, in restaurants, and, uh, a trick I learned, uh, that works really well, and it works really well when I go to visit a new prospective client. I would walk out of my restaurant in the morning and walk all the way out to the street and close my eyes and say, "I've never seen this establishment before. I'm a brand new customer about to try it for the first time," and turn around and open my eyes and see what I looked like, see what the business looked like, and, was it messy? Was it trash? Was there weeds growing in the cracks in the sidewalk? Were the windows filmy? But I think every business owner should train themselves to look at that. I'm a buyer because you find so many things. You
Hmm.
talked about it earlier, the due diligence process. Do your own due diligence process, and do it all the time. You say, how can an owner spend the time preparing the company? Well, if you take a due diligence list and you're going to start from one and go to, I've seen many of them with 400 items on them. You're never going to get through it, and you would never do anything else. But start with just that. If I was coming in to run this business tomorrow and I had never run this business before, what would be the first thing that would be problematic for me? What would be the first thing I didn't know? And start there.
That is a great question to be asking yourself as you run the business. Yeah, I mean that's getting the weeds out.
Mhm. Just, I walk into places and, even in this day and age, Uh, the reception area has been taken over by filing cabinets, which are full and have 3-foot-high stacks of whatever, I don't know what they are, purchase orders or invoices that haven't been filed or something, stacked up on them. You know, if I was a business buyer, I'd be turning around and walking out the door then. Just the disheveled look walking in the door is enough to tell me this is not a well-run business.
As far as other tools go or other mindsets, yeah, there's the business transition of getting your business ready to sell. There's also transitioning within the family. Like you said, there's ESOP. You're not an expert on that, but what are some of the basics that you've seen are regularly ignored? I mean, sometimes there are buy sell agreements that are maybe written up or written up and out of date.
Sure.
What are some of the other basics that you see that are just good business practice that are often ignored as you've done a lot of due diligence with companies over the years?
Well, um, certainly your documentation. I mean, every year, even with my peer groups, we still remind everybody to update your documentation annually. Have at least one shareholder meeting. Uh, the contingency planning and continuity planning are 2 areas where and they're different, and I separate them, and in the tools you use from us, Michael, you'll see that there's a couple places we talk about contingency where I feel we should be talking about continuity, and we'll be changing that over the next few months. Contingency planning is disaster planning. When I see contingency plans, if you go out and look up contingency plans, on the net. What you're going to see is a lot of do you have backups? Can you reestablish connections and do business remotely? What if you're flooded? Is there an alternative site where you can run from, you can operate from? And that's fine. And you should have that. That's business interruption stuff. But they all assume the owner is still there, that the owner is going to be making decisions and commanding the legions and getting them in the right place. What we do is continuity planning. You get hit by a truck on the way into work tomorrow. You're going to be in the hospital for the next 4 weeks. How does a business run? How does payroll get made? Who makes the decisions? What's the limitation on their decisions? Are there advisors they should be asking? Are there advisors your family should be contacting to make sure the business is running well? What are the guarantees that your income is going to, maybe it's longer than that, your income is going to continue? You know, what is the decision-making hierarchy if you're not there? I had it happen recently, and I've had it happen more than once. Manufacturer, and he said, "Well, I've got a good plant manager. The plant manager and the controller together could make the decisions." I said, "Okay, great. We should document that, number 1, so that everybody else knows." Um, which one of them calls the employees? "Oh, I wouldn't want the employees to know." You're gonna be gone for 4 weeks. The employees are gonna know, the customers are gonna know. Someone has to be in charge of doing the communications of that, you know, and then, when we get down to it, how much of a decision can your employees make? And he said, "Well, they couldn't go out and buy a new machine, but I think anything up to about $25,000 would be okay." And I said, "Okay, and over $25,000, who do they have to go to?" And he said, "Well, the board of directors." I said, "Who's on the board of directors?" "Me." "Okay, you're not getting the concept here, we have a problem." And it was a typical case of he used to have a partner, the partner retired, he bought the partner out, and he never did anything with his board. It's just momentum, you're in the business all day.
Right.
But, you know, corporations can't run themselves. It would have been a big problem if he hadn't sketched out a simple document that he gave to his wife and he gave to his controller and said, "Take this, put it in the safe, and if anything happens that I can't show up to work for a while, pull it out and take a look at it." And when you're doing that, that's the beginning of your delegation plan too. Well, wait a minute, there's nobody to make this decision. There's nobody to make that decision. This wouldn't get done. That gets you started on your preparation.
Yeah, and just taking a moment to just think through, yeah, if I was hit by a bus, didn't make it in, was going to be out for a couple months, what happens? How do people get paid? How do we collect from clients? How do we um, deliver? How do we make strategic decisions? Who's going to be that person? Who do I trust to be that person, or maybe a combination of people? And how am I going to transfer legal authority for them to do that if I'm asleep in a coma?
Right, right. I had a client some years back who was a mountain climber. Obviously, there's some danger there, and he was working on the 7 peaks, so, he was off to Denali, and he was off to Everest, um, and not only, was dangerous, but also he would, by its nature, be out of touch for long periods of time. And it was funny, he had a great system, I always loved it. He had a top-notch sales manager and a very good plant manager, manufacturing company, and he had a controller who was also pretty savvy. And his, documented process when he wasn't there was if the sales manager and the plant manager can agree on a course of action, that's what we do. If they can't, the controller gets to decide, and they both hated the controller. So they
That is so
they
funny.
they would do anything to reach agreement on what had to happen rather than have to go to the controller and have him make the decision, so it worked.
That's accountability.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. He sounds like a fun guy. Whoever he is, he
He
sounds like
was,
a
he
really fun
was.
guy.
And the other example that's here is it doesn't have to be something super complex that you brought lawyers in to draft it up. It just has to be something that works and that everybody knows what it is.
That's right. And that gets to the heart of even entrepreneurship is what works. So, what's maybe a lesson that you've learned over your 30 plus years assigned in both sides of the check? What's a lesson that you've learned that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Oh, all of them. Every single one. Whatever I learned today, I wish I learned 30 years ago. Um, uh, I think the best, you put me on the spot here. And what comes to mind is I think the best lesson I've learned is your employees are a lot more capable than you think they are. Every time I have taken an employee that appears to have talent and said, I am just going to keep pushing things at you until you tell me you can't take anymore. It when they say that, and I say there's no shame in saying that you can't take anymore. All we'll do is reprioritize. I'm not going to say I'm going to take duties away from you, but if you say I can't get to everything, then the two of us need to sit down and decide what comes first. Okay? Invariably, if that point comes, it comes a lot further along than I thought it would. People have a lot of capability and they like to have responsibility and they like to be busy and they like to be making decisions. Too often they're not allowed to. I've got a good friend, coached him for years, just sold his company for $70 million. And he's got a 2-year contract with the big company that bought him. Obviously, it's sizable to pay that much for his company, right? And he called me up and he said, all of us should have to go be employees somewhere for 6 months because now I understand why they make all the stupid decisions they make. He said, because I don't have enough information. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on. I get told by my boss and I ask him what the thinking is behind this. And his answer is, I don't know. It came down to me like this. It's anathema to any entrepreneur to be in that. I mean, most of the entrepreneurs I know that sold their company do not work out their entire work contract. They just can't stand it, But that's why, because their employers don't trust them enough to do the right thing.
I was just trying to imagine myself as an employee of my own company of like, okay, what if somebody else was making the decisions completely? How would it be different? It's an interesting thought exercise, but
Well, you've worked with a number of my employees, and we're a small
yeah.
shop. And we're a small shop. Christy's
Yeah, I've been very
been
impressed with your employees. I mean,
Christy's been
they
with
are
me.
so
Yeah,
giving and on it
and
and just
Christy's
go
been with
above
me
and
for
beyond.
for 17 years. Sarah's
Yeah.
Sarah's been with me for 14 years.
Yeah.
Leela's been with me for most of my life. She's my wife, and I'm not going to tell you how many years because she would kill me, but it's a long time.
We'd both have contracts out on us.
Yes,
I've been so impressed with your organization.
but it's the same thing. They've grown into those positions. They started out with, I won't say busy work, but they both came with very structured. This is and Leela's different because we've run other companies together too. Um, both those employees came to me with very basic entry level structured positions, and I kept giving them things, and they kept doing them. And they've grown into, they're multi position players, and they very seldom come to me anymore and say, "What should I do?" Because they know. I get an email saying, "This came up, this client said this, I had this request, and this is what I did. Just wanted you to know." That's
Love
heaven.
it.
That's heaven for a business owner.
Absolutely. Yeah, that level of autonomy, awareness of, where the values of the company stand, where your values stand, what you would have done, and just doing it. When should a business owner value their company? Get a valuation done on their company?
I think when they first start thinking in this vein, um, and, uh, you have to pay something for it. I mean, if your financial planner or a business broker tells you, "I'll do a free valuation of your company," that's usually worth about what you paid for it. Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah, but, software-based, I use BizEquity. I don't pretend to be an appraiser, but it's a good program, and I know I have a large number of CPA acquaintances and other planners who have had the opportunity to compare it to full certified valuations, and it's very, very close. I think for a first shot, it's worth it. To go out to an ASA certified appraiser, um, be careful to tell them that you want it for internal purposes, because if they price it as something that they have to go in front of the IRS or they have to go in front of a judge in a conflict, the price is very, very different than just say, I'm pricing this for internal purposes.
I appreciate that you're saying this because um, within the last couple of weeks, I got a request, and they were aghast at the price for a certified valuation compared to they thought they could get one for a couple $100. I'm like, yeah, but you got to realize if you're going to wind up in tax court, you really want that stamp.
Oh, different story.
Uh,
Different story.
yeah, completely different circumstance.
I just started working with an owner a month or two ago, and he wants to sell to an employee. And he had a valuation done, and the valuation was about $4.5 million. And I looked at the cash flow and I said, there's no way we can engineer an installment sale to an employee where he can get enough money out of the company to pay you for it. So I asked for a copy of the valuation. I read it. I asked permission to call the certified appraiser who did it, I didn't know him, but I know his firm, and they're a very, very good firm. And I got on the phone with him and I said, I don't see this. I don't see where you got $4.5 million. It's not working for me. And he said, oh, that's because we were asked to do it for the owner's parents' estate transfer. And I have to do it by IRS estate rules. And that means I had to look at all the key employee insurance. I had to look at all the cash values. I had to look at the excess cash that they keep in the company that he wouldn't have in there if he was transferring the company. I had to look at some other assets that he had in the company that the IRS says you have to count whether you like it or not. He said, oh, no. He said the fair market value if he went to sell this company would be somewhere between 2.3 and 2.4. I said, well, that works a lot better for our purposes. Thank you. And then I had to go explain it to the owner, of course, but it was logical, and I could point out the areas where it was. But yeah, the purpose of evaluation can change. That's a good example of how dramatically it can change the valuation.
Absolutely, yeah. The starting point makes all the difference.
Yeah.
And even just the first time doing evaluation is eye opening for business owners once they get in there, and especially if there's some questions about inventories and okay, where is all this stuff? Are you sure your inventory count is up to date?
And there are traps too.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, I just happened to talk to him yesterday. He's bought a number of lumber yards one by one.
Hmm.
And one of the very first ones, I saved him from what I'm sure would have been a disaster, not on his part. It was the third one he bought, and it was up in a more rural area in North Texas, and they had a, let's say, underqualified CPA doing their tax returns.
Okay.
And they had been using the owner's, what we jokingly call the owner's retirement plan, which was writing down their lumber inventory every year, saying, no, this is no good, this is no good. And they had over the years written down $800,000 worth of lumber that was actually sitting in their yard.
Oh.
And the CPA told them, well, what you want to do is you want to sign a separate contract for the inventory that includes that number for the $800,000, and then have him pay you in installments for the inventory, because installments aren't taxable until you receive the money. And I looked at the deal and I said, he is mistaken. This is depreciation recovery. This is stuff you wrote off from your tax returns in the past that you're now saying is really there and is really worth money, and you're getting paid for it. And the IRS doesn't care about installments. They're going to bill them at ordinary income for the full amount on the day they sign the paper. And I had to send him back to the negotiations. I wasn't doing the negotiation for him. I had to send him back 3 times, and the accountant kept saying I was wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong. I said, no, I know I'm right on this one. And finally, the accountant came back after the 3rd time and said, well, they must have changed the law very recently, because, which was absolute bull. The law's been that way for the last 30 or 40 years. But, so It leads to another thing. When you're doing a transaction, get professional advisors that know transactions. An attorney isn't an attorney isn't an attorney. Litigators don't know transactions. Real estate guys know real estate transactions. They don't know business transactions. Tax preparers don't know transactions. Estate planning attorneys don't know transactions. Find somebody that does business transactions.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I appreciate that. That was maybe one of the last questions we could end on is just the value of advisors around you that understand this space.
Good help. Get good help. I tell this story, and it's in one of my books, I'm sure, because I've used it for years. You walk into the physician and you say, "Doctor, my shoulder hurts. Can you help me?" And he says, "Yes, I can." What's he going to do? Depends
Gonna
upon
for
what kind of doctor you went to. Is he a chiropractor? Is he an internist? Is he an orthopedist? Is he a general surgeon? A neurologist, they can all do something to help your shoulder stop hurting. But they're all going to do something different depending upon how they were trained.
hmm And they may just refer you out too, send you to someone entirely different.
The good ones, boy, I love coming across an attorney or a CPA that has a long existing relationship with a business owner that says, that's not my area, but I know a guy who can do it. That's music to my ears. And if you have a good relationship with the advisor, they should be willing to say that.
Absolutely. Well, John, thank you so much for taking some time to come on and share some of your wisdom, some of your experience, and thoughts around how to get a business ready to transition, what that looks like, how fun it is when you have a business that's able to run without you there for a couple of weeks and without your cell phone. Um, yeah. And thank you so much for the investment you've made in the business transition space with the tools you've put together. The research you've done and been able to share on the statistics, the realities of when you want to transition, when you want to cash out. And I wish you the best on your launch to your fourth book, which is coming up at some point. It
Yeah,
doesn't sound
probably
like
in the
maybe at a
fall.
launch in the fall. Okay, yeah. So congratulations on that. Wish you the best. I'm excited to read it myself. This has been John Dini with us with the Exit Map. And here on Real Wealth Podcast, sponsored by Leading Edge Financial Planning, where we help clients make wise financial decisions. So, John, have a great, fantastic day, and I wish you well.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's been a pleasure. And as you can tell, I'm a little bit passionate about the topic.
As we can tell, absolutely.
Have a great day.
All right, you too.